Okay, so we are having our Saturday Srimad Bhagavatam study. Just setting up our screen share. And welcome, Chaitanya Doy is also with us today. Wonderful. So we are going through Prahlāda Charit, this section in Srimad Bhagavatam describing the Leela of Prahlāda Maharaj. And we're still hearing about the backstory, for lack of a better expression at this moment. And specifically, Hiraṇyakaśipu, Prahlāda's demonic father, and his plan to become immortal, control the whole universe, kill Lord Vishnu. That's also part of his agenda. Let's see how it all works out for him. Okay. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur-militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Okay, Dandavat pranams to all the assembled beautiful Vaishnavas and sincere seekers. So chapter 3, Hiraṇyakashipu's plan to become immortal. This chapter describes how Hiraṇyakashipu performed a severe type of austerity for material benefit, thus causing great distress throughout the universe. Even Lord Brahma, the chief personality within this universe, became somewhat disturbed and personally went to see why Hiraṇyakashipu was engaged in such a severe austerity. Hiraṇyakashipu wanted to become immortal. He wanted not to be conquered by anyone, not to be attacked by old age and disease, and not to be harassed by any opponent. Thus, he wanted to become the absolute ruler of the entire universe. With this desire, he entered the valley of Mandar mountain and began practicing a severe type of austerity and meditation. And we can remember, right, that we're in Satya Yuga here, right? We can locate ourselves. We're in Satya Yuga, and we can remember, right, yoga and meditation, they were the recommended practices for Satya Yuga because generally people had capacity to practice this type of extreme renunciation from the world and strong mental control. But of course, Hiraṇyakashipu is taking it to another level, right? And this is what allows him to acquire this type of power that he does. So Hiraṇyakashipu is engaged in this austerity. The demigods return to their respective homes because Hiraṇyakashipu had been devastating the planetary systems, right? We were hearing about that in the previous chapter, but he goes into this austerity. The demigods are feeling everything's okay again, and everything's going back to normal, but not for long. So while Hiraṇyakashipu was thus engaged, a kind of fire began blazing from his head, disturbing the entire universe and its inhabitants. So because his meditation was so strong and so intense, then these types of, this type of intense energy, right, is coming from his body. And I'm also remembering the example of Dhruva Maharaj, right? When Dhruva Maharaj was disappointed because of his father's neglect, he went into that intense meditation, and it was that energy field he was generating was so strong that it was disturbing the whole planet, right? And so that was why Lord Vishnu ultimately came to him to pacify him, right? So this type of, when you enter into these types of practices, you will generate this very intense energy, which will start to, affect the elements around you, right? And so this is what Hiraṇyakashipu is doing now. So this fire is blazing from his head, disturbing the entire universe and its inhabitants, including the beads, the birds, the beasts, and demigods. We can think of it as like the ecosystem, like if there's some change in the ecosystem, everything else, everything is affected by it. So it's like that. Hiraṇyakashipu's disturbing the ecosystem. When all the higher and lower planets became too hot to live on, so this heat, this fire is so strong, so intense, it's affecting the planets above and below him. And the demigods, being disturbed, left their abodes in the higher planets and went to see Lord Brahma, praying to him that he curtail this unnecessary heat. The demigods disclosed to Lord Brahma Hiraṇyakashipu's ambition to become immortal, overcoming his short duration of life, and to be the master of all the planetary systems, even Dhruvaloka. Upon hearing about the purpose of Hiraṇyakashipu's austere meditation, Lord Brahma, accompanied by the great sage Bhrigu and great personalities like Daksha, went to see Hiraṇyakashipu. He then sprinkled water from his kamandalu, a type of water pot, upon Hiraṇyakashipu's head. Hiraṇyakashipu, the king of the Daityas, bowed down before Lord Brahma, the creator of this universe, offering respectful obeisances again and again and offering prayers. When Lord Brahma agreed to give him benedictions, he prayed not to be killed by any living entity, not to be killed in any place, covered or uncovered, not to die in the daytime or at night, not to be killed by any weapon on land or in the air, and not to be killed by any human being, animal, demigod, or any other entity, living or non-living. He further prayed for supremacy over the entire universe and requested the 8 yogic perfections, such as anima and lagima. I'm just thinking, I'm just really thinking about, how, different vibrations can affect our environment, the environment around us, and, the vibration that we are generating that also has an effect, negative or positive, on our environment around us. Nowadays in this age of Kali Yuga, everything's so polluted. So there may not be such perceivable effects, of various vibrations because there's just so much in the mix. But especially this is Satya Yuga, right? It's such a pure environment. It's a sattvic environment. And so, anything that's not aligned with that, it will make there will be some manifest reaction within the environment. And I'm remembering there's that incident we hear, right, with in the time of Lord Ramachandra, that would have been in Treta Yuga, right? And we hear there was this Brahmin's son who died, right? And it's still, Treta Yuga, it's still a very, generally a pure age, and for someone to die prematurely, that's something that you don't see, right? And so this Brahmin actually went to Ramachandra and made some complaint about this, what's going on? Like, there's something seriously wrong if my auspicious young son had to die. What's going wrong in your kingdom, Ramachandra? Putting some responsibility on him. There's something off here. And so then we hear no doubt this is something that some may see in a controversial light, but we hear that Ramachandra, when he heard this, he went and he had heard, or he knew of some man of a lower birth. He was a Shudra, and he was studying the Vedas, very seriously. And Ramachandra killed him, right? There's actually some prohibition for persons of lower birth to study certain scriptures. That's mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. And the idea is that if someone, not just that they're of lower birth, that's not the point, but the point is of lower consciousness, right? Because if you are coming into possession of this type of subtle knowledge, but your consciousness isn't high enough to be able to use it in a positive way, then that's dangerous, like the atom bomb in the hands of the wrong person, that can destroy the world, something like that. And so Lord Ramachandra understood, because there was this disconsonance taking place, there was this, it was an incongruous thing that was going on. Someone of lower consciousness was inappropriately studying these higher elevated texts. This was creating, an inauspicious energy field, which, ultimately led to the death of this young pious man. So it's a really interesting thought. And then, coming back to ourselves, right? Again, this is a very polluted age, and there's just such a big mix of everything that's going on. But at the same time, we do make an effect upon our environment. There's also, our Gurudev mentioned this interesting point. It mentions in the Ayurveda Shastra that persons telling lies, this creates sickness within the environment. That's something our Gurudev mentioned. Persons telling lies, that creates this negative vibration, which can cause sickness, cause disease. And so it's really something to think about, like, what type of energy field are we generating in the way that we, carry our consciousness, the way that we speak, right? Like no sound is ever lost. Like, this is something discussed in, I think, physics, right? That, every sound vibration that's expressed, it's continuing at some point in time, right? Like every word that we express, every movement, every action, even our thought field, they're all generating a particular, vibration, and that has an effect on the environment around us. And so it's something to think about. We are all responsible to our environment, right? We don't live in a vacuum, right? We're all responsible to our environment. And so if not just for ourselves, for the sake of our environment, we can try to conduct ourselves in a higher way, right? And that is good for everyone. Anyway, just some thoughts that came to mind. When we had the opportunity to be in the association of Srila Govinda Maharaj, it was something very, very potent. It's something that, for those who haven't experienced it, it's hard to put into words. His energy field was so powerful, just, so many devotees have expressed, right? Like just being in his presence, you didn't feel any need to say anything, and sometimes just to sit in silence, was so nourishing. And, many of us also experience, like, we might go in front of him with some question, but because his, field was so strong, we suddenly felt the questions weren't necessary. It just to be in his presence, like, every question was answered, right? Every need was fulfilled. Such a strong vibration of love and nourishment, and because he's living on such a high, pure platform, right? So that's generating an energy field, which is almost tangible, right? Because the goodness in him is so strong that it's like almost tangible, that you could feel that in a tangible way. So we are, of course, in a very small, we are at a very low level, but we can all do our little bit, to try to raise the vibration of our environment. Jivana Didi here in California, she likes to quote, it was something was it John F. Kennedy said, I think, and her husband, Udamanyu Prabhu, used to quote it, saying that high waters raise all ships. High waters raise all ships. Meaning that like if one person is doing something good, wherever it may be, that has an effect on the sum total of the environment, and that is beneficial to all, even if we are not aware of it, but that is benefiting everyone. So something to think about. So here in the case of Hiraṇyakaśipu, right, he's generating this power and this energy because of his severe practices, but he's doing it with a wicked intention, right? And so this is creating havoc in the environment, and this is just the beginning, right? Okay, so we can begin text 1, and we're blessed to have Suvasini Didi with us today. Please lead us in the Sanskrit Didi, or if you want to add anything, please also do.
Yeah, let's start. Shri Narada Uvacha Hiraṇyakaśipu Rajan Ajayam Ajaramaram Atmanam Apratidvandvam Ekarajam Viditsata.
Narada Muni said to Maharaj Yudhishthir, the demoniac king Hiraṇyakaśipu wanted to be unconquerable and free from old age and dwindling of the body. He wanted to gain all the yogic perfections like anima and lagima, to be deathless and to be the only king of the universe, the entire universe, including Brahmaloka. And I don't think it's mentioned in the purport, but I think there are 8 yogic perfections, right? Siddhis, they're called, right? That can come through serious yogic practice. And there are 2 here mentioned, anima, lagima. I know this lagima, that means to be very light, right? Like, you can walk on water. Anima, I'm not sure. And there are 8 in total. Probably someone in our group today can list them. So please feel free if you'd like to. But it's funny, in our modern age, all of these things we get through modern technology, right? We can get those through modern technology. Purport, such are the goals of the austerities performed by demons. Hiraṇyakaśipu wanted to receive a benediction from Lord Brahma so that in the future he would be able to conquer Lord Brahma's abode. Similarly, another demon received a benediction from Lord Shiva, but later wanted to kill Lord Shiva through that same benediction. Thus, self-interested persons, by demonic austerity, want to kill even their benedictors, whereas the Vaishnava wants to remain an ever-existent servant of the Lord and never to occupy the post of the Lord. There's that expression, right, to it's I think it's said about envy. There's an English expression that maybe it's Shakespeare, actually. Maybe someone can say that the green-eyed monster that will bite the hand that feeds it, right? Something like that, right? This is the nature of envy. Even the person who is your benefactor, you want to harm them. This is how insidious, envy can be. Through Sayujya Mukti, which is generally demanded by asuras, one merges into the existence of the Lord. But although one sometimes thus achieves the goal of the theory of monism, one falls down again to struggle in material existence. So this is mentioned right elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam, that that one may, achieve the goal of what's described here as monism, right, or Mayavad, or other type of impersonal approach to the Lord, based on merging into his effulgence. It's because it doesn't represent our natural position, as loving, dynamic servitors and lovers of the Lord, then we can't remain there eternally, right? So there's that. There's a famous verse. I'm sure Suvasanidhi remembers it, saying that I can't remember right now, but saying, these persons, they think that they're liberated, right? But it's not. They may be there for many ages of time, but it's not a permanent position, because until one is situated in that position of loving service, which represents our intrinsic nature, everything is going to be shifting and cycling. It's not a permanent position. Okay, go on to verse.
स तेपे मन्दरद्रोण्यां तपः परमदारुणम् ऊर्ध्वबाहुर्नभो दृष्टि पादाङ्गुष्ठाश्रितावनि.
In the valley of Mandara hill, Hiraṇyakaśipu began performing his austerities by standing with his toes on the ground, keeping his arms upward and looking toward the sky. This position was extremely difficult, but he accepted it as a means to attain perfection. So standing on his toes, his tiptoes, arms upward, looking toward the sky. Very difficult, very difficult.
जठादीधितिभिरेजे संवर्तार्क इवांसुभिः तस्मिंस्तपस्तप्यमाने देवास्तानानि भेजिरे.
From the hair on Hiraṇyakashipu's head there emanated an effulgent light, as brilliant and intolerable as the rays of the sun at the time of dissolution. Seeing the performance of such austere penances, the demigods who had been wandering throughout the planets now returned to their respective homes.
तस्य मूर्ध्नः समुद्भूतः साधुमोऽग्निस्तपोमयः धीयग् ऊर्ध्वं मधो लोकान् प्रातपद् विश्वगीरितः.
Because of Hiraṇyakashipu's severe austerities, fire came from his head, and this fire and its smoke spread throughout the sky, encompassing the upper and lower planets, which all became extremely hot.
चक्षुर्नद्युधन्वन्तः सद्विपादश्चचालभू निपेतुः सग्रहास्तारा जज्वलुश्च दिशो दश.
Because of the power of his severe austerities, all the rivers and oceans were agitated. The surface of the globe, with its mountains and islands, began trembling, and the stars and planets fell. Wow. All directions were ablaze. My goodness. My goodness. The rivers and oceans were agitated. The surface of the globe with its mountains and islands were trembling, and stars and planets fell. It's interesting, because yesterday I was reading about this El Nino. There's this warning that's been issued about this El Nino, and it came up like as a warning on my phone, weather report thing, and I didn't understand it, so I looked it up, and it's not so straightforward to understand. It's kind of like one of these phenomenons that it starts with one thing, but then there's like this knock-on effect where it's affecting so many other things, and so it's not just one effect or one one thing that's happening, but it's a phenomenon that involves many different manifestations in the environment, right? So it's like something like the water in one of the oceans becoming overheated for some reason. And then this starts affecting so many systems on the planet as a whole, right? And so that causes different effects in different parts of the world, right? So like might be too much water, too much rain, flood, river disturbance, ocean surges in one part of the planet. Another part of the planet can cause droughts. So it's like it's something that involves many different consequences in the environment. So I'm like hearing about this, it sounds like a type of El Nino event where this one, incident of the Lord of Hiraṇyakaśipu like generating too much heat from his head, that has like a knock-on effect within the environment, so that there are all these different consequences that are created, right? Okay, we go into verse 6 here.
तेन तप्ता दिवं त्यक्त्वा ब्रह्मलोकं ययुः सुराः धात्रे विज्ञापयामासुर्देवदेव जगत्पते दैत्येन्द्र तपसा तप्ता दिवि स्थातुं न शक्नुमः.
Scorched and extremely disturbed because of Hiraṇyakashipu's severe penances, all the demigods left the planets where they reside and went to the planet of Lord Brahma, where they informed the Creator as follows: O Lord of the demigods, O Master of the universe, because of the fire emanating from Hiraṇyakashipu's head as a result of his severe austerities, we have become so disturbed that we could not stay in our planets, but have come to you. So we hear, right, when there's different disturbances happening throughout the planetary systems, and the devas, they will, sometimes go to Lord Brahma, and then other occasions, right, we hear they'll go to Lord Vishnu, floating on his ocean of milk, and request for an intervention. Please come and help us.
तस्य चोपशमं भूमन् विदेहि यदि मन्यसे लोकान् यावन् नङ्क्ष्यन्ति बलिहारस्तवाभिभूः.
O great person, chief of the universe, if you think it proper, kindly stop these disturbances meant to destroy everything before all your obedient subjects are annihilated.
तस्यायं किल सङ्कल्पश्चरतो दुश्चरं तपः श्रूयतां किं न विदितस्तवातापि निवेदितम्.
Hiraṇyakashipu has undertaken a most severe type of austerity. Although his plan is not unknown to you, kindly listen as we submit his intentions.
सृष्ट्वा चराचरम् इदं तपो योगसमाधिना अद्यास्ते सर्वदिष्ण्येभ्यः परमेष्टि निजासनम् तद् अहं वर्धमानेन तपोयोगसमाधिना कालात्मनोश्च नित्यत्वात् साधयिष्ये तथात्मनः.
The supreme person within this universe, Lord Brahma, has gotten his exalted post by dint of severe austerities, mystic power, and trance. Consequently, after creating the universe, he has become the most worshipable demigod within it. Since I am eternal and time is eternal, I shall endeavor for such austerity, mystic power, and trance for many, many births. and thus I shall occupy the same post occupied by Lord Brahma. So the demigods are representing Hiraṇyakāśipu and his plan, right? It's interesting, right? Because Lord Brahma, he's achieved this post through austerities. So he's thinking, so Hiraṇyakāśipu is thinking, I can also achieve a very powerful post through austerities. But the difference, of course, is that Lord Brahma, he's performed those austerities for the sake of being able to do good, right? Whereas Hiraṇyakāśipu wants to achieve this position of power in order to attain a powerful position for his own agenda, at the expense of the welfare of others, right? So looking the same, but actually very different. And we can also mention as a side note, it is mentioned in the scriptures that a jiva soul can achieve the position of Lord Brahma. You know, it's mentioning here through severe austerities, but it's also said that if one can perform their duties perfectly for 100 lifetimes, then they may be offered that post of Lord Brahma. So a highly qualified jiva soul, they can achieve that position. And I remember a Charja Maharaj, he had a joke because he was the manager, in Navadvip for many years, and the temple manager, he had a joke that if you imperfectly carry out your duties for 100 lifetimes, then you'll become a manager. Okay, go to the purport here. Hiraṇyakāśipu's determination was to occupy the post of Lord Brahma, but this was impossible because Brahma has a long duration of life. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Ahar Yad Brahmano Viduhu. 1,000 yugas equals 1 day of Brahma. The duration of Brahma's life is extremely great, and consequently, it was impossible to occupy that post. And that means billions of years, right? What is it? 1 day is for 4 billion, and then the night is also 4 billion. Something like that. It's an astronomical, inconceivable amount of time, just 1 day. And we hear the people of Satya Yuga, they would live on average around 100,000 years, right? So, which sounds like a lot to us, but that's nothing, compared to Lord Brahma. Our Gurudev, he was mentioning once, how, because, it's kind of mind-boggling for some of us to think of, but, the devas, they also have a lifespan, they're occupying posts, right? But they're also part of this whole cycle of birth and death, right? And, and we worship the devas, right? But they're also not totally immortal beings. And, from where we're standing, it looks like that, And our Gurudev, he mentioned, like mosquitoes live for something like 2 weeks, and they, some insects live for a few days. And so they look at us humans and think, these humans, they live forever, And so similarly, we look at the devas, they live forever, but actually it is not so. They're still living within the relativity of this temporary plane of existence, right? Swarup, Didi, what is that? I'm trying to remember that verse saying like, I can't remember, but until we're sorry, go ahead.
Which one? What was?
It's saying like until we're situated in the service of Lord Krishna, like on the eternal, on the other side, right? Then we're not. Yeah,
Rupam Sarupena Vivastiti. Is
that's
that
it.
one?
Yeah, thank you, Didi. Muktir hidvanyatadupam swarupena vyavastiti. That real mukti, real liberation, is when we're situated in our swarup, our eternal spiritual nature. So you're not in a safe position until you reach. And there's also that verse in Bhagavad Gita, right? It's in Bhagavad Gita, right? Abrahma Bhuvanau Loka, right? From Lord Brahma, the highest being in this universe, down to the smallest insect. Everyone's subject to this cycle of birth and death. So the duration of Brahma's life is extremely great, and consequently, it was impossible for Hiraṇyakaśipu to occupy that post. Nonetheless, his decision was that since the self, Atma, and time are both eternal, if he could not occupy that post in one lifetime, he would continue to execute austerities life after life, so that sometime he would be able to do so. So, this is also a nice example, right? How, certain qualities that we generally think of as being good, if they're applied, to a negative purpose, then they're not good, right? So like determination, like you can admire his determination. Like on one level, I'm admiring like, wow, like he is determined, right? And he's ready to face this extreme austerity, but ultimately his goal is not something to be admired, right? And so this is, determination, but in the mode of passion and ignorance, right? So what value is it? So all these qualities, and yesterday in our class here discussing, the third verse of Upadeshamrita, which is mentioning these qualities of, enthusiasm, patience, and so on. And all of these are good qualities when they're applied to something worthy, right? Because otherwise, like, Elon Musk, right? He's on track to become the world's first trillionaire. And, I'm sure he spent many sleepless nights in order to generate that level of wealth. And I can appreciate that he works so hard. But, what is he doing with that wealth? How much is he doing good for others, So that is something to think about, right? Okay, we'll go to 11.
Anyatedam vidasyeham ayatha purvam ojasa kim anye kala nirdute kalpante vaishnavadibihi.
By dint of my severe austerities, I shall reverse the results of pious and impious activities. I shall overturn all the established practices within this world. Even Dhruva Loka will be vanquished at the end of the millennium. Therefore, what is the use of it? I shall prefer to remain in the position of Lord Brahma. Purport: Hiraṇyakashipu's demonic determination was explained to Lord Brahma by the demigods, who informed him that Hiraṇyakashipu wanted to overturn all the established principles. After executing severe austerities, people within this material world are promoted to the heavenly planets. But Hiraṇyakashipu wanted them to be unhappy, suffering because of the diplomatic feelings of the demigods, even in the heavenly planets. By diplomatic feelings, I think he means their, subservience to Lord Vishnu. I suppose so. Well, it's not so clear. He wanted those who were harassed in this world by material transactions to be unhappy for the same reason, even in the heavenly planets. Indeed, he wanted to introduce such harassment everywhere. One might ask how this would be possible, since the universal order has been established since time immemorial. But Hiraṇyakashipu was proud to declare that he would be able to do everything by the power of his tapasya. He even wanted to make the Vaishnava's position insecure. These are some of the symptoms of asuric determination. There we go.
Iti sustruma nirbandham tapaha paramam astitaha Vidatsvanantaram yuktam swayam tribhuvaneshvara.
O Lord, we have heard from reliable sources that in order to obtain your post, Hiraṇyakaśipu is now engaged in severe austerity. You are the master of the three worlds. Please, without delay, take whatever steps you deem appropriate. Right? So the demigods, right, they've been conveying what is Hiraṇyakashipu's agenda, and now it's interesting though, because they don't explicitly say, like, please help us, right? They're like a little clever like that. Like they're not like putting pressure on him. They're just saying like, we're just informing you of this situation. Please do whatever you think is right. And reminds me, there's a verse that Srila Sridhar Maharaj includes in Shishi Prapana Jivanamrita, right? And it's saying, like, I am the most fallen, and you are the savior of the fallen. Considering this, please do as you think is appropriate. It's not explicitly saying, oh, please help me. I'm so fallen, I need your help. But I'm just pointing this out to you. This is the situation. You know, you do as you see fit. Purport. In the material world, a servant is provided for by the master, but is always planning how to capture the master's post. There have been many instances of this in history, especially in India during the Mohammedan rule. Many servants, by plans and devices, took over the posts of their masters. It is learned from Chaitanya literature that one big zamindar, Subudhi Rai, kept a Mohammedan boy as a servant. Of course, he treated the boy as his own child, and sometimes when the boy would steal something, the master would chastise him by striking him with a cane. There was a mark on the boy's back from this chastisement. Later, after that boy had by some crooked means become Hussein Shah, Nawab of Bengal, one day his wife saw the mark on his back and inquired about it. The Nawab replied that in his childhood he had been a servant of Subudhi Rai, who had punished him because of some mischievous activities. Upon hearing this, the Nawab's wife immediately became agitated and requested her husband to kill Subudhi Rai. Nawab Hussein Shah, of course, was very grateful to Subudhi Rai and therefore refused to kill him. But when his wife requested him to turn Subudhi Rai into a Mohammedan, the Nawab agreed. Taking some water from his water pot, he sprinkled it upon Subudhi Rai and declared that Subudhi Rai had now become a Mohammedan. The point is that this Nawab had been an ordinary menial servant of Subudhi Rai, but somehow or other was able to occupy the supreme post of Nawab of Bengal. This is the material world. Everyone is trying to become master through various devices, although everyone is servant of his senses. Following this system, a living entity, although servant of his senses, tries to become master of the whole universe. Hiraṇyakaśipu was a typical example of this, and Brahma was informed by the demigods of his intentions. So Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada is mentioning this example of Subudhi Rai, and yeah, it's a I guess a bit of a wild story described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, right? And because at that time, there were some very rigid ideas around what constitutes purity, right? And so there was this type of superstition that amongst the Hindus of a particular class, that, even if a Muslim sprinkles you with water, then you're considered contaminated. You're now a Muslim also. There were some cases where, there was some violence, and, we hear of some Mohammedans like forcing Hindus to eat cow flesh and things like that, which is a little more serious. But even something like this was considered contaminating, and so it's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Subhuti Rai, he he was contaminated, so to speak, in this way. It was actually a crisis point in his life, and because he was told by his Hindu acquaintances that now he's got to do something about this. This is very serious. And so Subhuti Rai, he consulted with a range of different learned persons, asking them, what can I do? And there were many who like made different suggestions. One was actually to just kill himself. Like you're ruined now. You just kill yourself by, wasn't it like drinking boiling hot ghee or something really funny like that? And so Subhuti Rai, he's very bewildered by all of this, and he finally goes to Vrindavan, I think, right? Or he met with Mahaprabhu somewhere. I don't remember where it was. Maybe someone here can remember. And he asked Mahaprabhu for his advice. And Mahaprabhu told him, don't worry about anything. Just take Harinam. Just take the holy name. All shall be well. And perhaps gave him the instruction to go to Vrindavan. And it's also mentioned that this Subhuti Rai, he had actually wanted to like give up his worldly life and go to Vrindavan. And so this incident kind of gave him an excuse to leave that behind. And so then he ended up going to Vrindavan, and he ended up doing this beautiful service of taking care of the Bengali Vaishnavas who used to come to Vrindavan. There was it was like a regular route of pilgrimage from Bengal to Vrindavan. And so Subhuti Rai used to take care of them there. And, certain things, like they don't get certain home comforts in Vrindavan, or some of the food doesn't agree with them. Like it specifically mentions the Bengali Vaishnavas, they used to eat a lot of rice, right? And so when they'd come to Vrindavan, they would eat more, wheat instead of rice. And so you could say the Bengalis were gluten intolerant on some level. And so they couldn't digest the wheat very well. And so Subhuti Rai used to, provide yogurt for them to help them soothe their stomachs, and so on. So that's the rest of the history of Subhuti Rai. And I think specifically mentions like Rup, Sanatan, some of these very important Vaishnavas. He did service for them, helped them situate themselves when they came, and took care of them in all these different ways. So that is Subhuti Rai. But the point that Srila Prabhupada is making here, perhaps a little bit obscure, but that, the servant can turn on the master, right? That is a common thing in this world. The servant may be apparently serving their master, but they're actually scheming and trying to take the position of their master, right? And as Prabhupada says, there have been many examples of this throughout history. Okay, let's see now. We're just coming to the end of our time. Maybe it's a good place to stop, and it's always nice to hear any reflections from our group of Vaishnavas here. So we've ended on verse 12, I think, right? Okay, so verse 12 we'll pick up next week. Stop our screen share. Have a nice group today. I don't know if anyone wants to share any reflections or has a question, or maybe Suvasni Didi wants to share any thoughts.
I don't have much. It's just like I'm just wondering, like the last chapter, where, like how much Hiraṇyakaśipu was like, speaking the philosophy and instructing the relatives, of his brothers, sons, and all that, like that.
Mm.
Seems like a very soberly doing it, but then he turned out to be, you know, in this
Yeah.
way. So it's like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's almost like, yeah, like he has all this knowledge and wisdom, but then he's using it for something of such a lower purpose, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice point. Yeah.
And you have some questions there, some in the chat.
Oh yeah. Oh, thanks for letting me know. And also, welcome, Divi Shakti Didi joined us, and few others. We have Sadhvi also came in. And nice group today. Kanakalata, Chaitanya Doya, and we have an unknown number here. So let's see. I'm looking in the chat here. Thank you, Didi. Wait, hang on. Let's see. The chat has everything from previous meetings, so I think I scrolled up too much. Okay. Okay, here we go. In my understanding, Bali Maharaj will be the next Indra. Is that right? And Lord Parashuram will be a preacher. So since there are change of position in the heavenly spiritual realm, will it be the same for us, like as above, so below? Um, I mean, I'm sure there are details of this in the scriptures. I mean, all I can really say is, that, the mood of Vaishnavism is that we are just trying to absorb ourselves in the devotional practices, right? Remembering the Lord, associating with the Lord's devotees, and Shravan, Kirtan, Sadhu Sangha, all these things, and trying to, as much as possible, not become caught up in all of the cycles and changes in this temporary world, right? That there will be so many changes, good, bad, and everything in between. But it is all part of the saguna flow, right? The saguna flow means the realm of the modes of material nature, which is a temporary plane of existence. It's not a part, and it's a flow that is operating separate from the Lord's own ecosystem, right? There's an ecosystem in this temporary world, which, and this cycle of samsara, birth and death, this is a part of this saguna world, saguna ecosystem. But then there's another ecosystem in the nirguna world, right? Once you get past the Brahmajyoti, you enter into the world of eternal, that the world that is based upon eternal loving service to the Lord. And our focus is on that plane, as we were just discussing earlier in our meeting today, right? That's muktir hidvanyatadupam swarupena vyavastiti. That is real liberation, and that is real existence. We can also say that is real life. Real life should begin with eternity. If eternal, like, what is actually the point of cultivating something if it's not based on eternal principles, right? Because otherwise it's like, yeah, I'm going to achieve this and this, or have this and this, but there's no stable position there. It's going to vanish sooner or later. So the first question is like, how can I first get a stable position? How can I enter into an eternal life? And then I'll take it from there, right? And so, yes, there are many details about how this world operates, and then, these upper planetary systems, they are more, how can I say, they are superior planes of existence to compared to where we are now. but they're still part of this whole cycle of birth and death, right? And it gets tricky because some, these words can be used in different ways: heavenly, spiritual. Like, what does heaven mean, right? Heaven, we normally use that word to refer to these, what is in Sanskrit called Swarga Loka, right? This is the term for the heavenly planets. And they are superior planes of existence, more subtle, more beautiful, more fine planes, more refined planes. But they're still not a part of the Lord's own flow, right? The Lord's own ecosystem, right? There's still a level of disconnection from that organic whole, right? And so we don't have so much interest actually in these planes. It's helpful to have some understanding, some knowledge of them, gives us some reference point about where we are and where's going on. And that knowledge is out there, it is knowledge you can look into and find. But it's not essential it's not essential knowledge for our progress, right? And you hear some of these expressions like Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying, like, let me take birth as an insect, right? If I can have association with the Lord's devotees. He says, I'm not interested even to have the position of Lord Brahma, the highest post in the universe, if I cannot have the association of the Lord's devotees. And then as for, there being changes in this world, there's always going to be, we're in this whole, all these cycles in this plane, right? This material plane. There are always going to be these cycles, and some are good, some are bad, right? And right now, Kali Yuga that we're in, the age of quarrel, is considered to be a very degraded and challenging, most degraded and most challenging age. And within that, there may be also different periods which are better than others. We're living in this world of duality. So that is always going on. But ultimately, we are trying to become more fixed in our connection to that nirguna world, that permanent, eternal, stable world. And that means ultimately cultivating the mood of devotion, right? So Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself in his Shikshashtakam, right, he's expressing Nadanam Najanam Na Sundarim Kavitam Jagadeesha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmanishware Bhavatad Bhaktir Haituki Tai. I'm not looking for anything except for devotion for you. And let me continue in the cycle of birth and death. Mama Janmani, Janmani. I'm happy to go on in this cycle of birth and death. If I need to go round and round in this material sphere, let it be. Let that happen. But I just want to remain fixed in remembrance of you, right? There's also a beautiful prayer of Nanda Maharaj, right? Karma bir brahmyamananam, where he's saying, according to my karma, according to the will of the upper world, to providence, I may have to wander here and there. I may have to undergo all kinds of experiences, but my only prayer is that my devotion for you will increase. That my devotion for you will increase. And manaso ritayo nasyu. There's that beautiful verse. May our minds always be in remembrance of the Lord. May our voices always be engaged in kirtan to the Lord. May our bodies always be engaged in making obeisance to the Lord. Nanda Maharaj continues in his prayers. So we're trying to become more absorbed in this deeper plane, deeper connection. And in those devotees in whom that connection is very strong, they're almost unaware of what's going on. you know, there's that one example of I forget his name as a king. He became Vritrasura, something like that. He was cursed, right, by Parvati. He was a king. Do you remember his name, Didi? I can't remember. It's described in Bhagavatam, but anyhow,
Puranjana.
sorry, who is it?
Maybe Puranjana.
No, it's someone else.
Chitraketu.
Who?
Chitraketu.
Chitraketu, King Chitraketu, that's it. Yeah, Chitraketu. He was King Chitraketu, who's a great devotee, right? And we hear of that incident. He was on his airplane floating in the sky, and he observed Lord Shiva in an assembly of so many great sages, and Lord Shiva's in the position of honor, and he had his wife, you know, Parvati, in his lap, you know, and it looked a little incongruous to him. Like there's this, you know, holy meeting going on with all these sages, and Lord Shiva sitting with his wife in his lap, a very intimate pose, and Chitraketu was very surprised and not offensive. He was a devotee of Vishnu, and he was not being offensive, but he made some type of exclamation like, oh, what a surprising sight, you know, to see something like this. And Lord Shiva was not offended at all, but Parvati Devi, she became offended on behalf of her husband, and she expressed, you know, like, oh, don't you know who Lord Shiva is? You know, how can you be so offensive? And so she cursed him to have a hellish birth in his next life. And so he did. He became this Rita Sura, right? But what was astonishing was that Parvati observed that Chitraketu Maharaj, he didn't blink. You know, he was undisturbed. You know, he humbly accepted that curse and went on his way. Right. And Srila Maharaj discusses this in one place, you know, saying, you know, because he was so deeply situated in his mood of devotion that for him, heaven or hell, Narayana, there's a beautiful verse there, Narayana Pada Sarve, begins like that. That, you know, those who are Narayana Parayana, who are full of devotion for Lord Narayan, for the Lord, it's inconsequential to them, you know, what their physical environment is composed of. So all these changes are going to take place, all these cycles within this world of duality. That is inevitable. And sometimes they will be more pleasing, sometimes less pleasing. But we are trying on the whole to become more detached from that and fixed and connected to a deeper plane. Right? Machas Parshastu Kunteya Sitoshna Dukkha Dukkha. This Bhagavad Gita verse is also expressing that. Right? So there is a shelter, you know, there is a shelter that comes from absorption in remembrance of the Lord and Harinam and Sadhu Sangha. There is a shelter in that, spiritual shelter. And we will be protected from all of these things, you know, just like Prahlāda Maharaj, you know, in a very tangible way is protected, you know, when his father tries to submit him to such horrible torture, right? He is fixed, he is immovable in his devotion to the Lord, and the Lord is caring for him. His faith makes that protection a reality, you know. Through faith, we will get everything. Mhm. All right. Well, thank you for bringing that question up, Sadhvi. We're happy we could discuss that. Any last comments from anyone, or should we end there for today? Okay, well, thank you all for your yes, Nazar.
I have a joke. Maybe Hiraṇyakaśipu was bored and wanted some fun, to have some fun. because he created so much movement, and Vishnu come to him. It was very interesting.
Well, actually, who was bored was Lord Vishnu. That was how it all started, because Lord Vishnu wanted to have some play, you know. The way our Guru Dev expressed it was he wanted to exercise his muscles, you know, and so that was how this all actually started, you know. It is for the Lord's fulfillment, right? And so these two gatekeepers, right, Jai and Vijay, you know, they ended up being cursed and had to take these demonic births, right? And so this is part of this whole like wider story going on, right? And so, because actually we have to remember that, right? Ultimately, Hiraṇyakaśipu, we may badmouth him, you know, but he's just playing a part. He's playing the bad guy part for the Lord's satisfaction. And so, you know, Hiraṇyakaśipu and then Hiranyaksha, they're the two brothers, right? Jai and Vijay. So they're coming to give some play, some exercise to the Lord. And then in the course of that, you know, this whole wonderful pastime is playing out, and all these wonderful teachings are also coming out for our own upliftment. And because there's a whole story around it, you know, our boredom is also being alleviated, right? We're also getting some excitement. You know, it's not just like we're being told like dry philosophy, but there's a whole exciting story around it, you know, so it captures our mind so much more. The Lord is very clever, right? He finds ways to capture our attention. So we have this scary demon and we have this sweet little boy saint. You know, there are so many captivating and intriguing elements to the pastime of Prahlāda Maharaj. But yeah, thank you for that reflection. Okay. Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai, Shri Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai, all the assembled devotees, sincere seekers ki Jai, Prahlāda Maharaj ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai, Jai Gaur Premanande. Thank you all so much for your good company. It's been such a beautiful gathering today. Jai Shrimati Suvasini Didi ki Jai, Jai Gaur Premanande. Haribo.
Vishaka Didi ki jai. Thank you so much, Vishaka.
Thank you, Didi. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful week ahead and look forward to next week. Okay. Bye.